Welcome. This is Alexia Hudson-Ward, the editor-in-chief of Toward Inclusive Excellence, or TIE for short, a multimedia blog hosted by Choice, a publishing unit of the Association of College and Research Libraries, a division of the American Library Association. We explore issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility that affect the higher education community. Among the goals of this channel is the development of a pool of knowledge and actionable resources for information professionals, undergraduates, faculty of all disciplines, campus staff, and administrators at every level seeking to understand racism from new perspectives and to promote racial justice on their campuses. We are excited to welcome you to our podcast series that borrows its name from the higher education academic calendar. Therefore, you are listening to TIE's Fall Semester Podcast Series. Our second Fall Semester podcast features a great discussion with Crystal McCormick Ware, the inaugural Chief Diversity Officer and Senior Advisor to the University President on DEI at Duquesne University. In this podcast, Crystal illuminates for us how colleges and universities can foster and strengthen belonging on campus for all campus populations, including students, faculty, staff, and administrators. Crystal highlights how belonging must go deeper than institutional statements to incorporate measurable outcomes such as the retention of students and staff. Crystal served as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives at the University of Pittsburgh Library System from 2004 to 2021. In that role, she was responsible for DEI initiatives for over 250 faculty, staff, and students on 5 campuses, including 4 regional campus libraries. She also conducted diversity programming and training for the entire library system and led university library system-driven diversity efforts throughout the larger academic community. Crystal is a founding member of the Greater Pittsburgh Higher Education Diversity Consortium and has provided diversity and inclusion training for the Pittsburgh Public Schools Food Service Division, the Junior League of Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Diversity Council, the National School Nutrition Association, and other nonprofit organizations based in the Pittsburgh region. In her role at Duquesne, Crystal is the coordinator of the President's Advisory Council on DEI and provides essential updates on internal metrics and progress on DEI initiatives. Crystal also works with the university president and the leadership, advising on issues related to Duquesne's DEI strategy and providing support to advance innovative approaches to diversity-related initiatives on campus. She holds a bachelor's in political science and sociology, a master's degree in education from Duquesne University, and also holds several DEI certifications from multiple institutions. Now to our conversation with Crystal McCormick Ware. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us. Looking forward to this conversation today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm honored to do so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The topic of belonging is such a big topic. Yet I think for many of our Toward Inclusive Excellence listeners and our colleagues within higher education, it still feels a little nebulous. And so I know that you're going to be able to provide us a lot of really good context in relation to how belonging intersects with DEI. And so my first question for you is that, many institutions have adopted and incorporated belonging within their diversity, equity, and inclusion plans. So how do you, Crystal, define belonging within the higher education context, and is it measurable?
So I'll just give you a little bit of history. In my prior position, that's when the wording belonging came to be. So I think it's more generational. So I think the Z's and the young millennials, came up with the belonging piece. And so when I think
Mm,
of belonging, I think of, people feeling valued and comfortable in who they are and in their space. They have a comfort zone and a safety zone where they can say what they feel and not be judged. So, belonging to me and my interpretation, and just talking to a relatively older Z, who would be my 24-year-old daughter, what makes you feel like you belong? She says, comfort.
mm,
I'm not being judged. I'm not being attacked by my thoughts. And
mm,
so, with that
mm-hmm.
in mind, I said, well, let's go into a little bit more detail about this. So, Alexia, when you told me about, belonging, I'm like, let me do some research because I did work in a library at one point. But my best research was my 24-year-old. And, she's working now. And I said, you're in the workplace now. How do you feel like you belong? She says, well, they include me in things, they ask me for my input. So I feel like I truly belong and I'm not just a bystander as a colleague. And I feel the same way about higher education. These students are here for 4 to 6 years, or regardless, but it all depends on their program. But they want to have some input, not just inside the classroom, but outside of the classroom, so that they
Yes.
have some type of they leave their mark wherever they are, either in the classroom or in the residence halls, even in the lunchroom or cafeteria or eating facility, activities that they belong to, fraternities, sororities, other extracurricular activities. They feel like they truly belong and they have a voice and that they can participate, as you said, and feel very comfortable.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to follow up with you on the idea of like the intersection of belonging and inclusion. And as you and I've had like several conversations, belonging is really starting to rise to the surface of strategic planning processes with many institutions throughout the United States. And I imagine that globally it's going to also take some traction as well. Do you feel that this concept of belonging is measurable? So, in other words, is there some kind of connection through which we can say, yes, belonging has mattered, and here is why?
So we've actually been surveying our students and asking them within each unit, do you belong? Do you feel valued? And we've been getting data back. And the data has been conclusive. 97% of our students said that diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging make a big difference in them, deciding on coming to this institution. And
Wow.
91% said that faculty, staff, and administration, in terms of diversity, is a big deal. So, including them into the surveying, as opposed to just saying, are you happy here? Are you unhappy here? It's helping us with our retention measures. So, what we've done is we've taken that information back to the administration, faculty, and the president and the cabinet, and said, this is what's important to these students, as well as their parents. So parents have also had a say so in terms of where they want their children to go and belong on a campus. And so coming in, our admissions office has actually done some surveying as well, asking parents whether or not what's important. How do you feel like you can belong as part of the university community? And we actually developed a parent portal that's on the website for parents to log in and find out what's going on with their child. I mean, of course, it's not FERPA. They can't go in and look at their grades, but they can see what's going on campus so they can feel a little more involved in their child's life. And then the children, the students, they have an opportunity to have conversations with their parents. But,
Mm,
I think that's a big part of, belonging, that the parents feel like they belong as well. So we are intentional when we recruit, that we engage the parents as well as the students. It's important to us to do the whole holistic belonging and inclusion component. Including someone is nice. That's when you're inviting. You're like, hey, come on. Belonging is like, we need your input, and we need it
mm.
badly. We really value your input, and we're going to take it seriously. So.
Yeah, thank you. You touched on the connection between belonging and retention, and that actually goes into my next question for you. Is thinking about those connections, Crystal, also for faculty and for staff? Because I think for a lot of us in higher education, when belonging comes up as a conversation, we're going to incorporate it in planning, our minds and our gaze automatically goes to students. But you and I both know that belonging is just as essential for faculty and for staff and administrators as well. So, could you talk about those connections that you could potentially see between belonging and retention for the entire community, in addition to students?
Well, it's interesting you just brought that up because in my presentation to the new staff orientation this past week, I talked about valuing others and belonging. And that for the first time, we've had, I would say, informal affinity groups or employee resource groups, but now we're actually launching a full-fledged formal ERG group, and we're surveying faculty, staff, and administration. We've given them 8 choices. We said, and if you have
Mm-hmm.
some ideas, jot them down. But here we're going to start with 8. We're going to select the top 5, and then we're going to move forward with those. And as we grow, we'll add more ERGs. What I explained to the new staff is, if you don't feel like you belong as faculty, staff, and administration, it's going to be conveyed upon the student, and they're going to know that.
Yes.
These are very insightful young people. They will come back and say, someone's disengaged. Well, they act like they didn't really want to be here. They didn't want to service me. So, offices that are very important are student life, residence life, financial aid. These are the frontmen for universities. Admissions coming in the door, but then student life, well-being and counseling. All of these divisions that are student facing are so important. Even their academic advisors, which we now call we call them student success coaches, because we want it to be collaborative. We don't want it just to be the academic advisor telling the student what they need to do. This is a collaborative effort. So what we've done with that is the student success coaches were some of the main people who said to us, you know what, we need to feel like we belong as well, because we know that we
Mm-hmm.
have a very important role at the university. So now we have choices between religious diversity, because I'm at a Catholic institution, but we have such a diverse group of faculty, staff, administration, and students that are not of the Catholic faith. And so, in our Center for Wellbeing and Counseling, we have a non denominational prayer room. We have one in that space as well as within the residence life spaces, so that everyone feels like they belong. The LGBTQIA community, women, we've just added 4 more lactation rooms to the university, where we always had one. It was kind of hidden and tucked away, but now they're spread throughout campus. And so from January until now, we went from 1 until 5. We're getting ready to get 6, and then hopefully within another year we'll have 7 lactation rooms. The incoming, workforce at most colleges and universities you see are women who are childbearing. Just on my floor
Mm-hmm.
alone where I work, there are 2 women who are actually going to have a baby, and a couple of them who are coming back from maternity leave. It's so important that they feel like they belong. They should not have to do this in their car or in some space that is not comfortable for them. So you have to look at it from a holistic view as well as just, an academic or scholarly view. Belonging is extremely important. We will retain talented faculty, staff, administration, and students if they feel as though they belong and they have a comfort zone and that someone truly cares. And, research will tell you that a lot of faculty, staff, and, administration on campuses will leave because they just don't feel comfortable. We actually had a
Right.
student who came into Duquesne. He was not a student of color. He was a young man who was not a student of color, as I said before, but he came from lower economic means. Upon interviewing and coming on the campus, he actually called the admissions office, and a very caring admissions officer answered the phone. And he said, "I've been here for a week, but I don't know if I belong here." She talked
Mm.
him through it. She called me immediately and said, what should I do? And I said, give him my number. I said, I'm here for all of the students. I reached out to him. I said, here are some resources for you. But if you need to speak to me directly, I can help you navigate this system. I said, because not everyone is coming from, well means at this university. We have socioeconomic means across the board with faculty, staff, and students, across the board. So he came
Mm-hmm.
in and we spoke. And I said, I come from humble beginnings as well. I came from a steel town where both of my parents were, blue collar workers, a nurse and a steel mill. And it made him more relatable. It made it more relatable for him. He said, I just feel overwhelmed. There's a bunch of rich kids here. I'm like, everyone has their niche here and everybody has their place. And you can make your mark as well. And when I said that to him, he smiled a little bit and he said, thank you. He said, I was just so nervous because I just felt like I was out of my league. That imposter syndrome, and with faculty, staff,
Yeah.
and administration. So now I'll admit, when I came in, I went here, I graduated from here, I was very involved. My daughter went here. You have a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, do I belong here? And so you have to prove yourself. But then as the weeks went by, you infiltrate yourself, you become more comfortable because of the people around you who make you feel like you belong, who reiterate that you belong here and that you have a voice and that we're seeking you for impact and for influence and persuasion about DE&I and belonging issues and valuing others.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think for the purpose of our audience's knowledge, an ERG is an employee resource group.
And they're also called
And what
affinity groups as well. Yeah.
and they're also called affinity groups. Yes, and they're typically comprised of individuals who share some form of a commonality, who will formally or informally get together to support each other and also to support each other in advancement of the work of their respective institutions. And so, thank you for sharing that really great story about the constituting of some new employee resources groups at your university. It harkens to my next question for you, Crystal, around policy, right? And you and I, over the many years that we have known each
Long
other,
time.
we
Hmm.
many years that we've known each other. We have talked a lot about the necessity to not vacate governance while we are looking to scale DEI initiatives, belonging being one of them, right? And the implementation of the policy that invites various perspectives and experiences into the institution's decision making fold is really important. Can you talk about the ways in which you negotiate that political landscape, right? Around how you help to shepherd through or support or advance DEI policy that ensures that the belonging initiatives are successful and remain in place, that they have degrees of sustainability.
So I'm on cabinet. And so I'm one of two women on cabinet and two people of color on cabinet. I work very
And this
close
is the president's
the
cabinet, right?
president's cabinet of the university. So
Thank you.
on the weekly basis, we meet and we talk about and we hash out policies and procedures that will make life better for our faculty, staff, students, and administration. And so when I talk about DE&I, I want to get the 100% support of cabinet and especially the general counsel, community engagement, and the president. So across the board, we have all the senior vice presidents in that room. And as we talk about policies like the Chosen Name initiative, the Hear My Name initiative, the Lactation Room initiative, I need them as my partners and leaders and colleagues to help pass some things through. And so, but we make sure we want to be within the legal confinement of doing things legally through the proper due process, as well as getting the nod from cabinet. So I work very closely with the general counsel to make sure that we are in alignment, that we are not showing reverse discrimination or anti, all of the things that you can be accused of. We want to be
Mm-hmm.
so being a Catholic institution, it's easy because we follow our mission. And our mission is to serve God by serving our students. And we follow the seven marks of a spirit in education. We're the only spirit in university in the world. So we're a Catholic order that is very unique. So when we say you're a unicorn, you definitely are a unicorn because you're the only one. And so it's easy to infuse the spirit and mission along with the DE&I purposes because the Spiritans were the ones who went out into Africa and served as missionaries, and they had to serve a certain number of years in order to be ordained as a Spiritan missionary. They're throughout the country. We've had Spiritans in the United States for 150 years. So we there's that line of governance, but also the mission, the animated mission, and it's important that we infuse them on a day-to-day basis. So on any given day, I look at our diversity statement that has been,
Mm-hmm.
and we do have an official diversity statement that every new faculty, staff, administrator, and student receives the minute they walk in the door. So there's no question where we are. We say diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and social justice is in our DNA. And so it's read. They sign off on it. The parents get it as well. So they have a full understanding. But getting back to your original question, I make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, that we are within legal alignment, so that we are not showing any type of reverse discrimination or anything of that instance. But I am excited to just let you know that we do have a new DE&I certificate program that is 30 hours. It's for faculty, staff, and administration because we feel it starts at the top. So
Mm-hmm.
we also have DE&I within curriculum. However, we want faculty, staff, and administration to be trained. 30 hours, 7 required courses, and 3 electives, unless they want to take all 6 of the electives. I'm an overachiever, so I'll be sitting there at all 13. We're very excited because we're one of the first universities that actually has a DE&I certificate program, but it's infused with our mission. And so we're covering religious diversity, socioeconomic diversity, the military, the LGBTQIA community, implicit bias, microaggressions, Title IX, gender issues. We cover everything.
Wow.
How to be an ally, how to be an effective ally. And we talk about workforce bullying. They're like, well, what does that have to do with DE&I? Well, someone who's on the receiving end of a microaggression might see that as workforce bullying, and so we need to talk about that. So we're being very
Right.
transparent and very open about why it's important that everybody feels as though they belong. We are developing mentorship programs so that specific groups that might be underrepresented on campus, they have a place to go to outside of an affinity group or ERG just to have some camaraderie and friendship so that they know they're
Mm-hmm.
not the only one. So it's important that we make sure that everyone knows that they belong. And so, within the 9 months, almost 10 months that I've been here, we've made some leeway.
That's really fabulous. And I'm very impressed with Duquesne's internal credentialing program because it's one of the few in the nation that I've heard of where anyone can basically take a course of learning to be credentialed on a campus
Yes.
with the understanding around the intersections of the research, the policy, procedure. But then, as you had also said, it also helps to create a cohort of practitioners beyond the chief diversity officer, right? And so I just think that that's really an interesting aspect of the work that you are helping to lead and that you're designing at your institution. That is really fabulous.
We have 38 people in our cohort, and it's going from
Wow.
the deans all the way down the pipeline. So
Wow.
we're starting very high. We have 3 deans that are enrolled out of the 10 for this training. And they have been participatory, engaging. But then we also have admissions, the frontline people, and they tend to be younger. So our very first course that we launched on September 8th. The very first course that we introduced was generational diversity, because on college campuses we have 5 generations on campus, from the
Right.
traditionalists who tend to be faculty to the Generation Zs who are in the classroom. So then in between that, you have the baby boomers, the Xers, the millennials. And so, what can we do to bring everyone together to be on the same accord? Each course is 3 hours. We could have had the multi-generational diversity course for another 3 or 4 hours, in which we
I
might
bet.
hit. Yes, it was very engaging. There was some serious, we laughed a little bit about some of the stereotypes of each of the groups, but we said, how can we work with them? And so they might have these stereotypes or some bad publicity, but what can we do to work positively with them?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's really fabulous. So, Crystal, my last question to you is that, what has been great in watching your trajectory and your leadership trajectory for me is how you bring a lot of people under the tent and that you iterate on all of your professional experiences, to help to influence the ways in which a lot of individuals and entities can be under the broader tent. And so, reflecting back on your experience as an academic library administrator, and now sitting in the seat of the chief diversity officer of a major university in which you report directly to the president, I'm really interested in hearing from you. How can libraries contribute to and model institutional belonging efforts?
So, as the DE&I officer at the academic library at the University of Pittsburgh, a lot of what I did at Pitt, I'm doing here. I'm infusing and just transferring, and I have more power and more influence now. So
Right.
I'm taking it to another level. But with that said, I work very closely with the library still. I have someone on my bias education response team. I have someone from the library on the President's Council on diversity, equity, and inclusion, also the Inclusive Network, because they provide the research. They give us the cited articles that can back up any type of information that we need to present to cabinet and to faculty. They can look it up immediately and find out what the trends are in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the library dean, Sarah Barron, has been especially helpful, and her whole entire team. They've been so open, and I'm happy to say that they are on it in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're ahead. And I'm very proud of that because they've been open and honest. And even prior to me coming here, they were doing cutting edge type of programming, and they don't have a DE&I officer. This is just within the team. So, academic libraries, to me, and I have a soft spot for them because I worked with them for 20 years. If you use the library and take advantage of the resources and the expertise, there's no reason why any college or university would not have proper means to execute a diversity, equity, and inclusion program because of their information and their expertise on these subject matters. They have that information. It's just a matter of using it and using it the right way. So it's not just a place of books. And, I actually co presented with one of the library team at the new staff orientation. And they were talking about some of their programming and exhibits, and it's highlighting Hispanic Heritage Month. And they did the Holocaust, and they do programming almost on a bi monthly basis. And it's dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and which I'm really proud of as well because they infuse that some way, somehow.
Thank you. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the second part of the question is around how library staff can model belonging, right? And so we definitely bring the goods when it comes to the research and the enthusiasm of serving on committees that do important work. Yet there's a lot of work ahead of us in terms of our own diversity measures and metrics, addressing implicit bias, becoming anti racist organizations. So, could you talk to the academic library community? How do you see, from your vantage point, from your leadership role, what are the opportunities that are ahead of academic libraries in terms of really modeling internally, one to one with their staff, how to model belonging within the libraries?
Well, I can say just based on what I'm experiencing now, a lot of the librarians are working on committees throughout the university to learn more about diversity, equity, and inclusion, actually signing up for training, as well as going through their internal academic training through ALA and policy and AC or all of those types of programming can be really beneficial to academic libraries. Just from my tour, when I first began at Duquesne, I noticed that there weren't any lactation rooms, but then I got a phone call and they said, guess what we're going to do? We're going to add a lactation room just because you brought it up. And I was very pleased and happy about that because they're going through restructuring in that room, in that building, and they weren't necessarily sure if they were able to, they had to make choices between certain rooms. And when she said it, I said, oh, okay. I said, but it would still be nice. And so, you know what? I didn't have to ask anymore. 2 months later, she's like, guess what we're going to do? We're going to fit that room in there. So just things like that make a big difference in people's lives. Something that simple to say that we're adding a lactation room to a woman. And I actually had someone say to me, my children are older, they're teenagers, but I remember the days where I had to go out in my car or I had to go into the ladies' room. And to know that you're working on these rooms and the library is going to have one and certain divisions, we're trying to get them across campus. She said, that made me feel good. And she said, I'm just happy that there's somebody out there she said, I'll never have another child. However, she's happy that these steps are being made. So academic libraries, I think within themselves, they can do their own assessment as to where they are and where they need to move forward. Working with your
Mm-hmm.
DE&I office and asking them, what can the library do to be more inclusive? We actually did a study at the University of Pittsburgh prior to me leaving, asking students of color, what can we do to make you feel like you belong? They talked about artwork. So as a result, the University of Pittsburgh, they featured the August Wilson art on the floor, the archives floor, archives and preservation. Beautiful displays of artists who did different types of paintings and artwork to
Mm.
depict August Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Exhibits that display diversity, equity, and inclusion. During Disability Resources Month, to display your collection that talks about disability resources and how you can become more culturally competent in terms of, you know, November, Veteran Affairs and Native American Affairs, Disability Resources in October, Hispanic Heritage Month in September/October, December, highlighting all of the holidays of all of the religions going from, November all the way through January to February. You know, Black History Month, Women's History Month, highlighting those collections, talking amongst each other as to how you can, promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. It starts with the library dean. The library dean needs to set the tone and talk about it. And that page can be welcoming. You can have a diversity statement. And it could just be the university statement, but it can also be listed on the diversity on that page of the website of the academic library to know that you are in congruence with the university diversity page or land acknowledgement statement. I'm working on a land acknowledgement statement right now because Duquesne at the time did not have one. And
Oh, wow.
I felt it was important that we infuse the history of Duquesne University
Mm-hmm.
because the Fort Duquesne, before it became Fort Pitt, hence Pittsburgh, it was Fort Duquesne. And this was one of the major thoroughfares for the French and Indian War. And so I contacted the Three Rivers Adoption Council, Three Rivers Indian Council, as well as the library to get information about our, contribution and the historical content of Fort Duquesne before, Duquesne University and all of these things. And we put it together and we have a very powerful draft of a land acknowledgement statement. And I feel that I would have rather waited to have a good statement than just say, you know, here we're going to recognize you, we're standing on your land. But
Right,
here are the
right.
historical contributions that you all have made to American society that we use on a day to day basis. So that was from the help of the library.
Great. Crystal, thank you so much for this conversation today. We really appreciate it. And we know that our listeners are going to have a lot of value. You gave us a lot of really great ideas that we can implement almost automatically in partnership with our various institutions,
Yes.
chief diversity officers, and others who are really committed to this work and to this concept, broadening the concept of belonging. So thank you so much for your time.
And thank you. As a final note, I would just say that Chief Diversity Officer working with the library dean, if the library deans, if they're on this call, or the associate librarians are on this, webcast, I would I would challenge you to reach out to your CDO and say, after this podcast, I realize I need to reach out to you and be proactive. And what can we do to make life better for the university on the whole, not just the diversity office, but the university on the whole? Be on those diversity committees so you can take back that information to the rest of your body and your colleagues.
Great. Wonderful charge. Thank you so much again for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our Toward Inclusive Excellence Fall Semester podcast with Crystal McCormick Ware, the Chief Diversity Officer and Senior Advisor to the University President on DEI at Duquesne University. Sign up for reminders of new content releases and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your time and support. Be well.